Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL Graduates. Welcome back to another video where today we're going to be going through the forwards in FPL this season and we're going to be ranking them.
Okay then, so we're going to start from 5.5 million and work our way up to those premium assets at the top. Obviously, if you want to see those, you can skip ahead. We've got chapters in the video if you're struggling with certain price points. But yes, kicking it off with João Pedro here, 5.5 million. For me, he would be a fantastic asset. And probably a first, if not a master's asset at 5.5 million if we knew he was going to start come game week 1. But at the moment, we don't. He didn't go on pre-season tour with Brighton. So there is a bit of, rumour, speculation, I guess you could say, that he might not start the season. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Obviously, 12 returns last season on penalties for Brighton. Done really well in the Europa League.
Yeah, the 12 returns and being on penalties almost, if he starts, puts him on par in terms of attacking returns as the 7 million forwards, which is really, really decent. So, of course, I've put him as a first, basically going out there and saying, I think he's going to start the season, essentially, is what I've done there. But yeah, for the attacking returns that you're getting, the penalties that you're getting, yeah, he's just as good as a 7, maybe even a 7.5 million asset that you've got there for just 5.5 million. If Brighton start the season well and João Pedro is playing up top, then we can see a decent amount of returns to start the season, even despite sort of the fixtures on paper not being the best, maybe not the worst either. But yeah, I think Pedro is a decent option.
Yeah, next up in the 5.5 category, we're going to go straight to Adam Armstrong. Obviously, coming off the back of an unreal championship season for Southampton, almost single-handedly carried them up the league. So yeah, 34 attacking returns last season. Pretty decent expected numbers as well. In terms of fixture difficulty, from an attacking sense, Southampton had the best in the league, so they're facing some of the worst defences in the opening 6 games. For me, I think he's a really good enabler. Obviously, the minutes there are really, really assured. Getting nearly 3,800 minutes last season is crazy. I know, Ben, you mentioned before in a previous video that he obviously hasn't necessarily done it in the Premier League, but he hasn't had too many starts in the Premier League either. I think if he gets some consistent starts this season, we will see some good returns from him. One of the cons, I think, with him at the moment is that Ben Brereton Diaz has just signed for Southampton, so there is a question mark whether he still will retain the penalties. What's your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I think he will still retain the penalties. He's sort of been good with them from last season. Yeah, at 5.5 million, a decent enabler. Let's see how he gets on. If he doesn't do it in the first 6 game weeks, then he may not do it all season. So let's hope and see. Obviously, the fixtures tend to sort of swing nicely towards him doing well. Let's see how he does in those opening games. Yeah, sort of not ruled him out completely, but there's obviously a couple of question marks around that.
Okay, then. So then moving on to the £6 million strikers. Now, a couple of these are in a lot of drafts at the moment. Chris Wood, mainly him, to be honest. He obviously got 15 attacking returns last season, 14 goals and the 1 assist. 7th in terms of fixture difficulty for Forest. Obviously, the opening 3 are really, really good fixtures. I think for me, I just don't see him being a problem in terms of rotation. I think a lot of Forest fans have been scouring the web to try and find out who's going to be starting in this Forest team, because it is quite an exciting team to start this season off with those really good fixtures. And a lot of them think that Chris Wood will definitely start, and not to really overthink it, because Awoniyi has had so many fitness problems that sort of Wood will start if he's fit, basically. So yeah, I think he's a really good option. I think he also keeps penalties if he is on the pitch, which a lot of people think that Gibbs White will be on penalties. What's your thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, I think he'll keep penalties. I think he's a decent option, a decent enabler as well. Obviously, the one sort of drawback is Awoniyi has the injury issues, but when he's playing and fit and on his day, I'd rather have him up top than Chris Wood. He's so big, so talented, so quick as well. So yeah, that's the only sort of question mark and doubt that I'd have about it is, I know you said like, just keep it simple, he'll start. But if Awoniyi sort of really gets his fitness up and sort of gets those injury troubles behind him, then there could be a bit of competition up front for those players.
Yeah, and then moving on to the next player, Johan Visser is in next in the list. Both ranked at a 2-2. This I'd probably change my rating, to be fair, up to a 2-1 after hearing the news that Igor Thiago, their new signing, He is going to be out until probably the rest of the year, they said, with a meniscus injury. The fixtures to start for Brentford aren't great, to be honest. So this is maybe something that you could pick up on if you're wildcarding quite early on. But for me, I think Vissa, every time he has played for Brentford, him and Mbumo have both been really good assets. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think he's a decent asset if, the sort of, you see the injury to Igor, you see potentially Tony moving on. So there's always that potential that he could do well. Maybe not going for him at the moment is just because of the sort of, the bad fixture run that they've got to start the season. That's probably the big thing that's putting me off. There's other £6 million options that have really decent fixtures to start off this season, and I'd maybe prefer to go with them.
Okay, then. So next up in the list is going to be Rodrigo Muniz. Again, Fulham, decent start to the season in terms of fixtures. So, yeah, it could be a really nice option. I think the minutes here are a slight risk, though, given the fact that Raul Jimenez is on the bench. And even towards the back end of last season, we were seeing Muniz come off quite early. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, again, it's this price point really that always produces the question marks. And if there are options that are available at 0.5 cheaper that you think, a lot less question marks on them, then you've got to go for them. Meniz, I think, is a decent option. It's the fixtures that really tempt me towards him. Yes, he's a 60-minute man. He's not going to get the full 90, but we have seen him produce sort of quite a good consistency of attacking returns, particularly towards the end of last season.
Yeah, and then the couple other players to finish off the list. We've got John Duran there. Obviously, we've both ranked him third for now. Obviously, if he does get a move away from Villa, I think that would obviously go up. But at the moment, that move to West Ham looks like it's cooled down a little bit. So yeah, it's still staying at Villa for now. And then Dominic Calvert-Lewin, obviously, just not really a clinical finisher. And Everton aren't a team that score too many goals. So yeah, for us, probably an avoid as well, despite relatively decent fixtures to start the season. One player that did crop up, and I was quite surprised by the data, to be fair, was Mateus Cunha. 19 attacking returns last season, which is obviously really, really good. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Obviously, Wolves don't have a great start to the season, but do you think he could be of use at quite a nice price, 6.5, right?
Yeah, he's emerging as a talisman, which is a really good thing. And the 19 attacking returns, even from 2,400 minutes, is really good. So, yeah, it's surprising to see. Obviously, the overperformance is quite clear to see. But, if he's in a talismanic figure, then he's always going to do that. So I think he's a decent price. I think he's a decent option. Maybe let's think about it once Wolves have got sort of a couple of those more difficult fixtures out the way. Okay, so moving on into those £7 million assets, and to be honest, it doesn't look great at this price point. Myself and Josh haven't put anyone above a 2-2 in there. And the reason is there's so many question marks about all of these guys. Rasmus Højlund, of course, Manchester United wasn't getting too much service last season, struggling a little bit, and the competition element to Joshua Zirkzee now coming in means both those Manchester United assets have real question marks around them. Josh, I'll sort of pass it on more to you as the United fan to sort of give a little bit more insight into that.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. Obviously, Højlund last season wasn't getting any service, really, as you can see by his expected data, with only 7 XG nearly and 1 XA. So, yeah, nothing great there from him. And potentially this season that might have improved, but obviously United did need a backup because it was Rasmus Højlund or nothing last season. So Zirkzee comes in. An interesting option. Obviously, he's 6'4", which is interesting in itself, and he's really technical. So between one of them, I think we could see spells of them being in our teams. Whether that's going to be from Gameweek 1, I absolutely don't think it will be from then. You got the likes of Bruno Fernandes in midfield, who's a much safer option. He's got the penalties, he's got set pieces, and he's only 1.5 million more, which isn't too much of a price hike. And obviously Marcus Rashford as well, he's also the same price as these assets, which I had expect him to get more consistent minutes this season. So yeah, for me, obviously both of them are a void off the bat, but I do see them both potentially coming into our teams later on in the season.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Richarlison and Gabriel Jesus together for different reasons potentially that you'd not go for them. Spurs have such a difficult fixture run to start the season. Richarlison and Jesus actually played a very similar amount of minutes last season. Jesus, it was a case of injuries and rotation. He wasn't sort of in favour with Mikel Arteta for much of the season. And Richarlison, obviously, there's rumours of him potentially leaving Spurs. He's gone on the pre-season tour, so maybe that sort of lightened up a little bit. But both have really big question marks over sort of different elements that are key for strikers in FPL.
Yeah, Richarlison hasn't even played a minute in pre-season yet, so yeah, for him to come in game week 1, I'd be surprised, to be honest. Obviously, they've been playing Kulusevski through the middle at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, they are linked with Ivan Toney as well, so that could still obviously come about. But yeah, Gabriel Jesus, again, he's looked a lot better in pre-season. I thought he looked really good against Man United in pre-season when he did come on. But yeah, I think there is going to be rotation between him, Havertz, and also you're not too sure where he plays as well, because he was used a lot in the wing positions last year. Okay then, so moving on to the 7.5 million forwards, we've got Ivan Toney up first. Obviously, it mentioned about a potential move away, so he's a definite avoid for now, depending on what sort of happens for him. I think if he stays at Brentford, I'd probably still avoid him to start the season just because of the fixture difficulty at the moment. And even to be fair, last season he didn't really have a great year. He came back with a couple of goals and then sort of went a bit missing towards the back end of the year. As you can see, only 7 attacking returns in that second half of the season. So, yeah, I think for me, if he got that move to Spurs, he would be really interesting because obviously he's got a lot more players around him who create chances. But yeah, at the moment, if he stays at Brentford, which I think is quite likely given the fact that Thiago's got injured until Christmas, I probably wouldn't go near him. Is that the similar thought with you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, he got less attacking returns in a similar amount of minutes to Richarlison and Gabriel Jesus, so it almost sort of puts you in a difficult position. Obviously, the penalties are a factor with Ivan Toney's game, and there wasn't so many penalties from last season anyway. So, yeah, almost becomes a bit of a sort of a difficult one to justify picking there.
Yeah, next up on the list is someone who I really like, and I've tried to put him in my draft a couple of times, but he keeps coming out of it. It's Dominic Solanke. He's got the most minutes out of all of these forwards on this list. So, other than Adam Armstrong, is it Adam Armstrong?
Yeah.
It is, yeah. I get confused. They both play for the same team, don't they?
I'm just closing the blind quick.
Go for it. Cool. I'll start that again. Okay then, so next on the list is Dominic Solanke, and he's someone who I've had in and out of my draft so far this season. Just some ridiculous numbers from him last year. He had the most minutes out of all the forwards in the Premier League last year with, well over 3,000 minutes. Barely missed a beat for Bournemouth last year. He got 22 attacking returns, which he also matched Ollie Watkins' goal output last year. Had the same amount of goals as him. Obviously, Watkins just had way, way more assists, which we'll get onto in a bit. And it's not even over-expecting in terms of his data. Obviously, nearly 20 XG, 2 XA. Some really nice fixtures. Ben, you've ranked him as first as well. Is he someone that, again, sort of that Bournemouth asset that we're overlooking?
Yeah, I think we are overlooking him to an extent, but the issue here is budget with him. Like fitting him in with sort of the other sort of players that we're going to talk about sort of a little later on in the video means it's really, really difficult to get him in as a third striker because the budget just simply doesn't allow it without making huge sacrifices elsewhere. So yes, he has really decent fixtures, really good attacking returns, and he's a great option. But there is one or two that I think really just tip it over and maybe sort of outdo him just a little bit, which is why some of these managers haven't gone for him.
Moving on to Nicholas Jackson, again, someone who has performed relatively well last season with 20 attack and returns. Chelsea, obviously, they do have that massive green patch on FPL's FDR in terms of their fixtures after Man City. But within all those greens, there are a couple of really good defences, as we mentioned, like Crystal Palace in there. I think Nottingham Forest is in there as well. So, yeah, an interesting run. Are you tempted by him, Ben? Obviously, you can get Nkunku for $1 million more. So probably a lot of people going there, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will go there. And like I said with Solanke, this price point is going to be really difficult to sort of cater towards, because you're sort of not looking at the elite strikers that, you're expecting sort of 25, 30 goals from a season, but they're not sort of anything to not sort of sniff at, really, because their data is producing some decent numbers. So, yeah, a difficult one to justify putting in just based on how good some of the other strikers are at a higher price point.
Yeah, 100%. And then we've got Mateta in there. Going to just brush over him quickly. Obviously, he's at the Olympics with France, so him coming back into that Crystal Palace team is quite a tight turnaround at the moment. Also being linked with a move away potentially to a Champions League club, which is interesting. He did massively overperform his data last season, so yeah, maybe someone to probably have on the back burner. I think Eze for me is a better option at 0.5 cheaper as well. So yeah, one to consider there. And then we've got the two Liverpool forwards as well, Cody Gakpo and Darwin Nunez. Will be really interesting to see how these guys sort of shape up in this Arnie slot system. I personally think that Cody Gakpo might get a bit of preference, obviously due to the both being Dutch, but we'll have to wait and see. And none of the £7.5 million midfielders or attackers for Liverpool are on pre-season tour, so we haven't had really too much of an inkling into who will start in that system, which is probably one of the main reasons we'd avoid, right, Ben?
Yeah, you just don't know how they're going to set up. I think the safest option is obviously Salah, and then once you get down to all of these other options, there's so many of them from Liverpool that it's difficult to pick out and highlight one that we think is going to do really well until we see the system in action competitively. Okay, so moving on into the premiums. To start off with, we've got Kai Havertz. Now, myself and Josh have got him down as a 2-1. Obviously, sort of starting for Arsenal, potentially a share of the penalties, maybe took some for Germany over the Euros. The fixtures are pretty decent as well. Not a bad option, Josh, right?
Yeah, I think towards the start of pre-season I was more interested. I think since seeing Jesus on pre-season tour, he's looked quite good, and I think he will take some minutes away from Havertz a little bit. Obviously, Nketiah is a rumoured move away, so that sort of saves some minutes there. But yeah, for me, I think Havertz is a decent option. He's priced quite well at 8. Obviously, saves you 2 million from Saka and only 0.5 cheaper than Erdegaard. But obviously, with those guys, you're getting consistent minutes. Even when Havertz was playing last season, he did usually get subbed off relatively early. So that's something to bear in mind as well, and probably only why he's at a 2-1 and maybe not at a first.
Next up, we've got Alexander Isak, who's both at Masters level for myself and Josh, because the expected data showed that he's performing at the level of a premium player, and he's not at that top premium price at 8.5 million. He's really affordable. Maybe a bit less minutes because of injuries, etc. But the fixture run is not too bad. The stats are ridiculous. I think pretty much every manager is going to have him, right?
Yeah, when you look at his minutes to his like expected data, it's like literally almost on par with Erling Haaland. It's a little bit crazy considering he plays in a team which obviously isn't suited to him like Erling Haaland is. Yeah, just a ridiculous asset. The fixtures aren't necessarily the best long term, but the opening couple are really good for Newcastle. I'm almost certain he'll be my captain come Gameweek 1 against Southampton at home. I just think he's just so good in pre-season as well. He's been banging in the goals too. So yeah, really nice option.
Next up, we've got Ollie Watkins. I've put him as a 2-1 rather than a first, and the reason behind that is just for the fact that I think he, you can see in the stats that he overperformed quite a lot in terms of the attacking returns. I don't think we'll see 37 attacking returns again this season for Ollie Watkins, especially with the European commitments that they've got as well. I think they will wouldn't want to say that they'd struggle with the commitments because their squad is growing, but they have lost a couple of players as well. Like I wouldn't say Aston Villa are massively stronger than they were last season. Josh, you've got him as a first though.
Yeah, I just think he's outperformed his data so much that he can't necessarily not still get some good returns. 37 returns is crazy. The expected assists is where that massive overperformance really lies because he got 11 assists last season, which is absolutely crazy. And as I said, sort of matched Solanke for goals with like 19, I think it was, I believe. So really good numbers from him. In terms of the price, I think he is a little bit too expensive. I think if he was 8.5 or maybe Isak's just too cheap. If they were both 9, I don't think I'd complain. But yeah, I'd much rather Isak to start the season or in general than Ollie Watkins at the moment.
Absolutely. And then finally, we've got the man that everyone has been talking about in preseason, Erling Haaland. Both myself and you, Josh, have put him at Masters level. It's the consistency of returns. It's the amount of attacking output. It's the fact that, he's not even overperforming massively. He's just sort of being so consistent with his returns. 35 last season, 29 XG, and just a 2XA, but unbelievable statistics.
Yeah, you just know what you're going to get. You're going to pay 15 million, and you're going to get a guy who can score 30 goals a season. He's just phenomenal. Comes away with large hauls most weeks. I remember the one against Wolves toward the back end of last season. Just a really good, reliable captaincy option. Which, for me, if you are going without Salah and Haaland, you are missing that consistency in terms of having someone who you can captain in any fixture and they can come away with any return, whether that be a goal, whether that be 3 or 4 goals like we've seen with Erling Haaland in his 2 years in the Premier League. So yeah, for me, he's literally like one of the first players in my team because he's just so reliable. Okay then, so that wraps up the forwards category on our sort of rating tier list. Let us know what you think of our ratings in the comments. Do you have anyone who's sort of placed a little bit differently? Let us know.
Yeah, and as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the FPL Graduates. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
later. Have a good pre-season, everyone.
So you may rise, but you'll never make me